Joining us now on the Menard Studio Hotline, the host of the all-new Russillo and Kanell Show, airs weekdays here on ESPN Evansville 105.3. Before us, from noon to 3 p.m. Central, it is Ryen Russillo. And Ryan, obviously there's been some breaking news here earlier this morning with Deflategate and everything else. We'll get into that and some thoughts on college football as that season gets underway later tonight here in just a bit. But let's talk about the new show. It's you and Danny Kanell. And I will say this. One, I've always been a fan. Always enjoy listening to you guys before we jump on the air in the afternoons. But this doesn't really feel like so much of a new show because Danny's been there so many times and has filled in so many times. But I like the partnership between you guys. How did we get Danny involved in this?
Well, he was my first choice. And, I really was thrilled after being here for almost 10 years now and 6 years in the slot. Scott and I did really well the last couple of years. We always thought we had a good show, but I guess the numbers started reflecting that more and more as growth of the show. So it wasn't, look, he has a great opportunity at night, and I think both of us are kind of ready to try something different. So, it's unfortunate because you build this thing. You guys know how it is. It takes really a long time to build that chemistry and to kind of build that following and define who you're going to be as a show. So the audience, it's such a habit-based thing. Sometimes people will still listen to radio stations that don't want to, only because the voices or the sound is familiar to them. I mean, it's a really odd dynamic. And with Danny and I, it is something, as you point out, that we've already done. I mean, we've done it a bunch. I've worked with him so much now over the last couple of years because Scott and I's schedule and how it works out. But I always felt like, okay, there is chemistry there. We do like each other as guys, we do get along pretty well. And I know that it's going to be, it's never going to be the same as Scott and I, because Scott's a very dynamic personality and a specific guy that's been killing it here for like 15 years. But with Danny, I knew that the college football thing was going to work. And I always wanted to make sure that when I looked across and I looked at a guy and we were talking college ball, that he was going to be able to hang. And now, look, I'm trying to keep up with him. So it's a little different. But, I mean, there have been some other people, you bring in from national, high-profile markets, and, they would come in and they just didn't follow it. And they even tell me after an interview with a college football coach that, man, I don't really pay that much attention to it. And I'm going, well, this can't work, So Danny was always my choice, and I couldn't be happier that ESPN basically listened and made it happen.
You've been there for, obviously, like you said, about 10 years or so, and now after 6 years with Scott Van Pelt, and for lack of a better term, the kind of the sidekick role with that dynamic. Now you've moved in and you're taking the lead. What's been a big adjustment for you in terms of that now that it's really your show to run, so to speak?
Yeah, the sidekick thing always bothers me, and it bothered me whenever I heard it. And I would tell anyone to even ask Scott that paid attention to how the show was done and how it was done, because I had more to do with outlining what we were going to do for the show every day than Scott did. And a lot of that had to do with the fact Scott was getting off SportsCenter late at night and would come in and we'd find a way to make his days more manageable, because the first few years of the show, he was doing 14-hour days hanging out on campus, which is just ridiculous. So I had more of the radio background because this is what I've been doing now for 13 years. So, ESPN at the time presented me as a sidekick, and I didn't really appreciate that. And, there were times where I thought maybe I should just show up at 1:15 before the show starts and grab a rundown and sit down and try to yell one-liners. So I don't blame anybody for seeing the show that way, because that was the way it was presented for such a long time, and it was why I was going to leave ESPN 3 years ago, because I was like, look, this is ridiculous. Like, I'm not going to keep working this capacity and put in these many hours and care this much about the show to just be a sidekick. So, unfortunately, I felt like I was kind of digging myself out of a hole for a really long time. But, the show was so much more than the big name guy and just his buddy off to the side, just kind of saying stuff every now and then, because and Scott's admitted this plenty of times, most of the ideas came from me. Most of the time I was writing out what we're doing on the show, and I was the guy coming in to try to make sure we were on point and doing what we needed to do.
So not really a lot has changed, maybe from the perspective of a listener. Behind the scenes, it's no different really for you then.
No, it's the exact same thing.
Right.
So I don't look at it as the only challenge now is that, Scott's so good at what he does and he's so well liked, and, he's probably easier to like than I am. You're going to run into people that are just, well, Scott's gone, so the show stinks now, and that kind of stuff. Like, all right, well, then you probably never liked me anyway. You only like Scott. So, there's nothing I can do about that. But my point has always been pretty specific with this, is that what I'm saying is real. I'm not saying anything for reaction. This business could be way easier if I just decided 5 years ago I'm going to say the craziest stuff ever, so everybody pays attention to me and they put me on SportsCenter, they put me on other TV shows. That's an easier path, but it's just not a path I couldn't keep track of all the stuff I said if I was just going to make up stuff all the time. And I think eventually you're exposed as that kind of guy. So like you could not like me. Look, I don't expect everybody to like me. I don't do this to be liked, but I want you to know how much work I put into it so that if I am saying something, it's coming from a place where I've thought this out for a really long time. And the way I do interviews, like I try to go, look, let's cut through all the nonsense here. Like what happened, And, Greg Schiano yesterday is a perfect example. Like, we're teeing it up. We can have generic football stuff. And then finally I'm like, hey, do you regret leaving Rutgers for Tampa? Now, the answer we got wasn't great necessarily because, he's probably just not going to go out there and say, yeah, the Tampa experience was terrible because he probably wants his coach again. But I'm going to ask that kind of question as opposed to, I think, other times hosts don't want to ask that just because they don't want to be uncomfortable in the room for 7 minutes. And I think we're all big boys here, and we can talk about a lot of stuff that sometimes people avoid.
I think one of the big things that people don't realize just listening to shows is actually how much time you spend with a co-host. I mean, Ryan and I have been side by side for about 6 years now, doing some sporting events and things like that. Now this show for a little over a year. But people don't realize just how much time you spend side by side with this person you're on air with for they feel just 3 hours a day. But there's a lot more that goes into it than that. How much of a say, 100% or what percentage did the upper brass give you when it came time to pick your co-host? Was it all on you? I mean, was it one of those guys, I can't work with that guy? And how'd that work out?
First of all, you're absolutely right. I mean, I spent more time with Scott, and staying with Steve, our producer. I kind of went through and did the hours because I'm not married. I go, I spent more time with Steve probably than any other human being in the last 7 or 8 years, which is kind of scary. And he's like, you probably shouldn't repeat that. Anyway, but you have to find a way to, Scott and I, we rarely had blow-ups. And I know I'm difficult at times because I want every show to be great, and if I felt like a segment wasn't good, I would say, hey, that segment wasn't good. Like, here's why I think we screwed that up. And, maybe I should care less. And it'd be easier to deal with at times. But as far as the selection of Danny, look, he was my number one guy. There was a little disagreement, I think, at first, only because I thought maybe we should try something different. Maybe we should add a third person, all these different things. And I just said, look, if you guys are trusting that I had anything to do with the success of the last time around, then let's try to keep something like, let's not completely revamp this and make it a brand new show. And I totally get that people. There's a lot of different opinions going around. There's people that are going, let's just do something completely different. Let's do something we've never done before. I'm thinking, okay, but if that fails, then I'll regret not trying to keep it consistent with what's so important to us in the fall is the college football and then, the NBA. And, of course, everybody does the NFL because it's the most important thing to do. But I just want to make sure the college football content was still really good. So I'd like to think that I had a big say in it because I was also negotiating my contract as we were trying to figure out who I was going to do the show with. So it wasn't like I was just under contract for a couple of years and they were going to say, well, you have to work here anyway. So, this isn't a power thing at all. I think we all kind of sat down in a room and talked it out after I worked with 12 different people over 2 months. And it was really a mutual thing. It wasn't like everybody wanted someone else and then I was the only one that wanted Danny. Enough people thought that Danny would be the right guy and I agreed with them and that it all worked out. So we're psyched.
Ryen Russillo, our guest. It's Ford and O'Brien, ESPN Evansville, 105.3 online, ESPNEvansville.com. Just some quick thoughts from you, Ryan. The Deflategate thing at this point, I don't know if it's over. It's stupid. We all agree with that it's ridiculous it took this long, but now the judge overturns the 4-game suspension for Brady. In your opinion, what does this mean for the NFL? How big of a blow is this for Roger Goodell and the upper brass?
Look, it looks bad today, and you're going to have a lot of people say that this is going to be the end of him or it's Waterloo and all these different things. It's not going to matter. The owners want him there. You could just say, well, the owners, he makes the owners a lot of money. Well, anybody who's a commissioner of any sport or any conference, if you haven't noticed, all of these programs, all of these sports are making unprecedented amount of money because of live rights television. So they like that he kind of takes all the hits for him. Like he's protecting the shield, but he's the one getting dented. And the rest of the owners don't have to deal with any of this stuff. And I think that he went so far overboard with this 4-game stuff to try to recoup some of that popularity or approval, which I don't think you're ever going to be popular when you're commissioner of a sport. He's been so beat up over the last few years that I don't know why. Like he became this guy who decided, all right, I'm going to hand out this kind of punishment. I wasn't rooting for Brady. I wasn't rooting for Goodell, the NFL. I was rooting for an NFL or a world where a 4-game suspension wasn't the norm for something this stupid. Look, the NFL is going to appeal this, and what I'd heard a couple days ago is that the NFL, if they lost it, which they do today, they could appeal it with Brady playing all year long, revisit this in the summer, and then hope that through the appeal court that if a suspension is then kicked back in, they could put it into play in 2016, and the NFL would still feel like they proved their point and that they were right all along. So, just put that away, knowing that this stuff never seems to end.
Could you imagine having to talk about this next summer? That's stupid. God, that's stupid. That it would go that long just to prove a point.
I get kind of the eye roll every now and then because as a host, I'll go, look, I got nothing left on this. Mm-hmm. I know it's look. We have something to talk about today because something actually happened.
Right.
A couple of days ago, we were told, all right, you should probably lead with this. And I go, why? Why am I leading with this? I was like, I'm done. I can't. I know I'm repetitive on it, and nationally, sometimes you get caught in that stuff. But you're right. I mean, if it happens next summer, look, if you're doing 3 hours on this next summer because of an appeal, then you should probably change what you're doing to the show a little bit.
Ryen Russillo, our guest, Russillo Kanell, precedes us every weekday, Monday through Friday, noon to 3 Central here on ESPN Evansville 105.3. I know we've already kind of kept you probably longer than we should have, but just real quick, college football gets underway tonight. You know the game very well, having hosted College Game Day on the radio side of things for a while. When you look, just kind of a quick thought at the college football playoff scenario and how things could play out this season, which of the Power 5 conferences may find themselves on the outside looking in when we get down to those final 4 teams?
The odds are the ACC. I mean, it is the weakest conference. I don't know if there's much of an argument, and it drives me nuts when the ACC coaches come up here and try to drop these just the dumbest numbers on us. Jimbo comes up and he's like, oh, yeah, we had the most draft picks of any division last year. They're like, okay, so I guess you guys are the best now. And they think that they're doing it to keep up with what they think is SEC propaganda. But it's like, okay, the SEC has almost double the number of draft picks overall as a conference than any other conference over the last 5 years. And, the ACC, we had participation, a higher number of participation of any bowl teams, and their bowl record stunk. And they've been atrocious for a decade. And the BCS before Florida State has really stepped it up, going back at least 2 years ago. So, I sound like I'm anti-ACC, and I guess it's because I am. I take it a different level because I have to sit and listen to every coach say all these things all the time about like how great they are. And it's like the ACC got mad at us somehow that we talked up the SEC. And then Jimbo even accused us of talking down Florida State this past year because they weren't in the SEC. And it's like, no, we talked down Florida State because you're national champs, so we have an expectation of what you're supposed to look like, and you guys haven't looked as good this year. So, that stuff with them, I mean, look, it obviously can happen where Clemson or Florida State wins the conference and you have a disaster in the SEC or all those Pac-12 South teams beat up on each other, because I think that division's really right there with the SEC West. So it certainly could happen. And look, we're going to have, with a 4-team setup, if it does happen for a while, we'll probably have a scenario where you get 2 from one and 2 are left out. Or, look, I don't know if I'm on the Notre Dame bandwagon as much as others, but it's such an impossible question to answer in absolutes, because if the ACC gets one in, it doesn't mean that everybody was wrong saying, oh, you were too dismissive of the ACC. Something dramatic could happen somewhere else, and it likely will, that you just can't predict.
Yeah. It's Ryen Russillo, host of Russillo and Kanell, weekday afternoons here on ESPN Evansville 105.3, noon to 3. Ryen, look forward to hearing what you and Danny can do. Best of luck with the show, and thanks for the time.
All right. Thank you.